My Gavan and Melanine, and well met indeed. I'm Arachír Galudirithon, the head of Divide and Conquer, and welcome to the penultimate faction overview, this time dealing with Dunland. The Dunlendings, Men of the Hills, and the faction. Here we have one of two Wildmen factions that I have left to do in these videos, the others being Anduin. Right, so the reason I've started with this message up is purely so that if you wish, you can pause this and you can have a read of this. So the people that do manage to watch this video, if you ever are playing as Dunland and you can't remember what lands you have to take to unite the clans, they are listed in this message just here. They are listed here in order to fully claim dominion over all of Enedwaith. The clans of Lugia, Malfin, Malrenaith, and Caerhil, Saraline, Erunvorn, and Caladir must be conquered. Now, those names are region names as well as clan names, so they are all certain regions, so you'll be able to see where you need to conquer. It goes on to explain some more about the borders of that, so it gives you an idea of what you need to take. But we'll talk about that more in the script section. So, first thing we're going to want to talk about is Dunland. First bit of housekeeping, as I always do at the beginning of these videos. Number one, apologies that this is a day late. I wasn't very well yesterday, so I couldn't actually do a video then. I couldn't face staring at the computer screen at all. So that's why we're a day late. Other than that, not too much news to tell, other than recently I've offered my services to Third Age Total War Rise of Mordor mod, for Total War Attila. So hopefully I can sink my teeth into some writing for them, which I'm looking forward to greatly. So let's hope we can get that mod off the ground. Let's hope that mod can be brought to fruition, as it certainly has a great base to go from. Other than that, in Divide and Conquer news, there's nothing really to say, unfortunately. Little changes over the past week, so we'll just crack on with the video. So, game start, Dunland. What does it look like? It looks like three regions, I'm afraid. Dunlarak, Dunyard, and Byrig. Southern Dunland, Northern Dunland, and Dunish Hills, or Hills of Dunland. Those are your three starting regions, nothing too fancy there, as you might imagine. You don't particularly get vast armies in any of them either. A couple of units of Clan Spearmen and some archers, and just Clan Spearmen. Second portrait in this game, and that is from King Arthur, the movie. Excuse me, sorry. Oh dear. Right, Rebel expansion. Where can you go with these three regions then? Well, the answer is not really very far, or not really anywhere at all. Directly to your west you are blocked off by Enedwaith, but to the north you can reclaim the old lands of Tharbad. Southern Tharbad and Northern Tharbad, both up for the taking. Then if you cross the Gwathlo through Tharbad, you'll be able to take some of the provinces in southern Eriador, all the way down until you again reach Enedwaith in the lands of down here, Saraline and Erunvorn, the Blackwood. And those are your regions north. To the south there are a few... No, there aren't any at all. Isengard takes them in the turn 1 auto expansion. There is nowhere to your south or west or east that you can go in terms of rebel provinces. You have to go north through Tharbad. That is your only choice, as the elves will more than likely take Ostinethil within the first sort of 7 to 8 turns, blocking you off there as well. So we touched on Enedwaith, but what neighbours do you have around you? Well, you should already know, as Dunland are one of the more famous factions from movies and whatnot. To the south, your staunch allies are Isengard, and I believe your only allies at game start. Yes, indeed, there we are. You are at war with Rohan, Bree, and the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, with animosity toward the dwarves dating back long before they even returned to Erebor, when they settled in the Dunish Hills when they were exiled from Erebor by the dragon Smaug. And they have not forgotten that they don't like you, so the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm start at war with you. To the south there's Isengard at the black spot there, and Rohan of course down to your southeast. Directly to your west lie the neutral clans of Enedwaith, although they are unlikely to remain neutral for very long, being a very aggressive peoples but just tend to be at war with everyone. To the north of course the elves come from Imladris, and then as I say they'll likely take Ostinethil. And far to the north, the enemies of Bree start in Bree, just there in this small section here. Outside of that, you won't reach too many neighbours too soon, but you can tell from the fact that you're near the Misty Mountains and where you are in the map, you can see the other neighbours around you there. Now, in terms of economy, Dunland's economy is somewhat tied to their unique script, which we'll touch upon in the scripting section. But as far as the ability to earn money goes, you don't have a great propensity to earn income, because you are a Wildmen faction, which means you cannot upgrade any castles, and nor can you upgrade any of your towns beyond large town level. You may be able to get wooden castle though. Actually, I think we made it so that you could get wooden castles. I'm not entirely certain, but I do know that you can't get anything more than a large town in any of your cities. So Dunlarak with Chieftain Yagthak is your largest possible, and that's true of any settlement you gain. So you can't get the top tier buildings, which will of course mean you don't have access to the massive amounts of money. In terms of construction, as I said, you're restricted by the town level that you can build, but the guilds that Dunland get are similar to everyone else, with a fighter's pit, warrior's hut, and then warrior's hall, giving you experience to both your types of troops. And that's not a guild, that is your culture increase. So the only guild you get is the fighter's guild, fighter's pit, the warrior's hall, and warrior's hut. So nothing really there, and other than that, nothing really construction-wise unique to Dunland at all. Right, but the scripting, this is where Dunland shines. They're one of the few factions who have a unique script dedicated to themselves, and we are indebted to Moss, where this is the concept is taken from and then adjusted to suit Dak's needs. And quite simply, it's called Dunland Rises. Well, it was in Moss. I don't know what it's called in our own. And also, I realise there's no notification at the beginning to tell you what you have to do. To write that down. Dunland Rises. But quite simply, what this means is that you will be restricted from building any ports, any siege equipment, and your two most elite units until you meet certain criteria. And these are that you make your faction the greatest faction in the game. But it goes in stages. So if your faction, if you go to the where is it? The end of turn scroll, I believe, has a little link to show you. Oh no, it's right there. Faction rankings. This is the one we want. Overall ranking. And it will show you, at the minute obviously no one is really anywhere. The top 5 factions does not include us. At the beginning of the game, the top 5 factions are Harad, Gondor, Anduin, Mordor, and Rohan, apparently. That's interesting. But anyway, so what you need to do is, if your faction gets within the top 10, you will unlock the ability to build ports. If you then get within the top 8, you will unlock your 2 greatest units, the Eisenmach Raiders and Eisenmach Cavalry, or whatever the dismounted or mounted version is called. If you get within the top 6 of the overall situation, you will unlock the ability to build siege equipment. And then finally, if you get within the top 3, then you get, I believe, a big financial and economical bonus. So your standing within the world will affect what you can gain. Now, of course, this can be rather tricky, because getting into those top levels will require certain factions to die before you can even get anywhere near them. But it rewards you for expanding and doing well as Dunland. So say that again, you need to be in the top 10 to get the port, the top 8 to get the Eisenmach Raiders and Riders, and the top 6 to get your siege equipment. Which means you'll be playing a large chunk of the game with no siege equipment at all. Now this is reasonably standard, as whilst Dunland have a lot of links to Isengard, the one thing they do not have is the ability to master siege equipment. And whilst Saruman obviously has siege equipment, that is a secret he keeps closely guarded. Whereas he is willing to arm you in some of his more superior armor, and that is what Dunland's sort of unique angle is. You've got a lot of Saruman's armor and the ability to upgrade your troops with good armor, but you don't have any of his siege equipment, as he keeps that to himself, just in case the inevitability arises that he needs to crush you. So you don't get any of your own siege equipment until you reach a high enough faction standing, and then essentially you can trade for the blueprints. Other script, as I said at the very beginning, is the Unite the Clan script. And now this is a script for both Enedwaith and Dunland, and so to achieve it you will need to defeat Enedwaith. And that is of course because you and Enedwaith are the 2 main clans of Enedwaith, which is the geographical region. And quite simply, all you need to do for Unite the Clans is claim all of the lands of Enedwaith. Now this runs from Bairig and everywhere between I believe this line across here, so straight down there, including Gund or Gind, small village just there, and the town that is at the edge of this fork. But you don't need Derwath, you don't need the castle there, and nor do you need Ginyard or Foldberg. But all the towns to the west, along the line of the White Mountains down to the castle there, I think it's called Balorn, and then north across the Gwathlo all the way up to Erinvorn, and then following the line of that river there, so you don't need the Caras Nernaled, the town in the centre there, City of Three Waters. And you do need Argond, and you will need Southern Tharbad. You don't need Matraith. Take all of those regions and you will unite the clans, which allows you to build a special guild hall, which gives you bonuses and lets you train your most formidable unit, the Guardians of Dunland. They are incredibly strong units, and if you can work towards getting them, I would certainly suggest it, as they are beasts. Right, in terms of difficulty with Dunland, I've never actually played as them. Not in the vanilla, they're not in vanilla, not in Frome, nor in Dak. They are a Wildmen faction, so you don't really have amazing troops. They've got restrictions due to the Dunland Rises script. And you start off in a risky location, because Enedwaith are very likely to go to war with you. Isengard obviously trap you in the south, and you face quite strong opponents in the north, in the Dunedain and Bree. So I would suggest they're probably a medium to high difficulty. Of course, it all depends on how you play the game, but that would be my suggested rating for Dunland. Sorry, I'm the throes of healing since yesterday, but I am still reasonably unwell, so it may come through in the video, and I apologise. I can't really give you any tips other than try and sort of keep Enedwaith your ally, or at least at peace for a while, and try and focus on heading north, taking Bree, and stalemating with the Dunedain. And once you've got a solid base, then throw everything you've got at Enedwaith and unite the clans, so that you can get those best and formidable guardians. And that is Dunland on the campaign map. Now let us go to the battle map and have a look at our roster. Now, as it is loading, I will use this time to tell you that there will be 2 units in this video that are not available to you, and that is because they will be in the next release. They have only just been added this week, or last week. I'd mentioned them being added in the last video, so they will not be in your game. And they are the Wildmen Warriors, I think they're called, and the I can't remember what Hummingbird called them. Mounted something. Oh, it's foggy. Mounted Warband and Dunlending Warriors. Now those 2 units are brand new, they're edited. The new unit really is the Eisenmach Raiders, but the Mounted Warband and Dunlending Warriors are both not going to be in your game, so do bear that in mind. Now a quick overview shows you that Dunland's got a reasonably sort of average roster in terms of their capabilities, with the introduction of another cavalry unit giving them something extra, and quite a few ranged units, so you do fill quite a few holes. Or you fill quite a few roles, I should say. The main premise between Dunland and Enedwaith is that whilst you're both Wildmen factions, and so essentially very weak, not very strong, the Dunlending's close relationship with Isengard sees them have stronger armour. So many of your units will be more heavily armoured than Enedwaith, but Enedwaith focus on sneaky sort of ambush style tactics and range, whereas Dunland focus on more heavily armoured and brute force. So you're kind of like the armoured berserker faction, and Enedwaith are like the lightly armoured sneaky ranged faction. So those are the main differences between the 2 of you. It's tricky to split them into tiers, as they are kind of really only 2 tiers of Dunland, but we'll try our best. Them there, and the Guardians bring up there. Right, so these units here at the front, if I'm not mistaken, are all available before the barracks event. Quite possibly all of these units are available before the barracks event as well. In fact, I think all of them are, except that they are slightly a tier above. Then of course you have the after the barracks event units, and finally the Unite the Clans unit. So we'll start at the very beginning. Clan Axemen. They all, as you have heard, have the unique Rudauer voice from Battle of Middle-earth. Clan Axemen is what you'd expect. They are Axemen. There's quite a lot of them, but they're not particularly strong. However, they are better than Orc Militia, so you've always got that in your advantage. Humans are always better than basic Orcs. But following on from Dunland's reasonably aggressive theme, they have a reasonably high attack for a militia unit, whereas most militia have 1 or 2, they've at least got 3, so they've gone in quite high, but otherwise not particularly amazing stats. Dunland are characterized by a bonus in forest, grassland and snow, so you'll get a bonus in almost every location you fight unless you ever make it to Harad. And that's essentially to identify that Dunland consists of the mountains, the foothills of the Misty Mountains, there's vast plains, and there are vast forests. And so they're adept at fighting in all 3. Their morale is poor, their morale response is poor because they are only wildmen. Although being wildmen, they are cheap. They're a very cheap army, so it's not going to cost you too much to keep them running. So the Clan Axemen, the first unit you'll get a lot of those in your armies. They're just basic Axemen. Next up are Berserkers, and these follow the Berserker pattern, so they don't have very much defense, but they are very aggressive. An 8 attack for a pre-barracks day 1 unit is really quite high, but as you can see from their armor, it is poor. Their defense skill is 5, but their armor is only 1, so they will fall to arrow fire really easily. Very, very easily indeed. Their high charge bonus and effective against armor, and they frighten nearby enemy infantry, all means that they are a formidable early game force, and one of Dunland's key pivotal units in the early game, because of how aggressive they are. But do keep in note they're not very good at defending, so if you are on the defensive you will need to use other units to hold the line, and they will attack on the sides. You will note though that they have excellent stamina, which is a trait quite common through Wildmen factions, because they live very down and dirty style lifestyles, woodsmen, farmers, out in the rugged. They don't have organised towns as much. So whereas your average Gondorian probably walks around in fine silks and lives in a house of stone, these men are still living in tents and rough cut wooden homes, living off the land and fighting against all weathers. So that's reflected in their stamina. They have good morale, the Berserkers, which is good for early game again, and they have impetuous morale response, which is the best type of morale response, but it does also mean they can charge without orders, as it says. So, which does just mean that sometimes they will try and push out into the enemy even if you've told them not to. And those are your Berserkers, again a very cheap unit. The Axemen are your average, are the middle ground of your first 2 units, or first array of units. The Berserkers are your aggressive first line units, and the Spearmen are your defensive initial units. So the Spearmen have a higher defense than the other 2 units. Well, it's the same as the Berserkers, but they get a shield, which gives them a bonus against arrows. But their defense skill is slightly lower than the Berserkers, and the same 1 armor. So the Axemen and the Spearmen are both reasonably defensive, but both are very susceptible to damage in the long run due to their low armor stat. But the Spearmen have a lower attack and a lower charge, but they can form a Schiltrum, and they are effective against cavalry, which gives them a slight edge in defense over the Axemen. And of course they have spears, so they have the animation bonuses there. But other than that, they're virtually the same as the Axemen, but slightly lower attack, but slightly higher defense. So the Spearmen and the Axemen play off each other as a defensive and an aggressive, and then the Berserkers come in as the shock unit. But in the early game, the first 2 ranged units you will get are Dunlending Huntsmen, and Clan Hunters. Now the Huntsmen are Javelinmen. They have a very poor attack, very poor charge, very low defense, but a 7 missile attack, which gives them a good edge. So they're not going to be very good in sustained melee. They will die by the thousands. If you have thousands of them, they will die that quickly. But if you can keep them behind your line quite safely and then use them to take out key enemy units, their high missile attack of 7 will do a lot of damage. So not very good in sustained melee, but they'll have an advantage if you can use up all their ammunition. They'll get a bonus against cavalry because javelins would be useful against cavalry. So that's reflected in their stats. But again, poor morale, although they do have an average morale response, which is quite which gives them a little bit of defense, just given how poor their actual defense stat is. And again, good stamina. Stamina can be one of 3 things: normal, good, or excellent. If there's nothing said here about their stamina, that means it's normal, and then it can be good or excellent. So good stamina, again, showing that they've got the middle of 3 stamina options, which is good. Counterparts with a bow are Clan Hunters. The clan hunters, your first archer unit, and that's obviously reflected in their stats. Not very good melee, not very good charge, same as the spearmen. Their defense is 4, which is the worst of those 3 starter units. So the clan hunters, the axemen, and the spearmen are your initial 3, your stock 3. All factions units tend to be built around a stock setting, similarly to the way that MMORPGs or whatever always have like the healer, the tank, and the damage dealer. It's similar in this sort of game. You've always got a defensive unit, an aggressive unit, and a ranged unit. And these 3 are those trio for Dunland. So the clan hunters, worst defense stat of the 3, as is always the way, but they've obviously got bows. So if you can keep them out of combat, they can do quite a lot of damage. 3 missile attack is quite good, especially for a militia unit this early in the game. So don't write them off. They can do they will be able to really pester the enemy, and if left unchecked, they will be able to bring down quite a few enemy units before they are taken out. Again, good stamina. They're adept at hiding in woods, so they can't hide anywhere. That trait is mostly reserved for Enedwaith between the 2 clans in Enedwaith, Dunland and Enedwaith themselves. With Dunland only being able to hide effectively in woods, whereas a lot of Enedwaith units can hide anywhere. And as you can see from our roster down the bottom here, only the Beast Slayers can hide anywhere. They got poor morale, average morale response again though, which is quite good. And then the rest of their stats there, you can have a look at their archery stats. Rounding off this first tier are your first cavalry unit, Dunlending Horsemen. And from looking from above, you can see how unmilitary, that doesn't make sense, how disorganized they are. You can see they don't have clear ranks, they're just a rabble. And that is very true of most of Dunland's units. But the cavalry have similar stats to the axemen and spearmen combined. Defense is only 6, but they do have 2 armor, so taking into account the armor of the horse. And then defense skill of 2 and shield of 2, so again very susceptible to arrow fire. But their attack is 4, which isn't too bad, and the charge of 4, which is poor for cavalry but good for infantry. Again, good stamina. And then there's a stats lower. They get a bonus against other cavalry, which is useful. So they are, along with your spearmen in the early game, they are your anti-cavalry units. But do keep in note that they haven't got a very high attack, and their charge and their defense isn't very high either, so they're not going to do too well in prolonged melee. They're more about morale shock style charges, so hitting enemies in the flank or the rear, or chasing down routing units. But again, very cheap, so get as many of them as you can. Right, in the next tier, the supporting tier, there are more unique units this time. The Beast Slayers, the Mounted Warband, Dunlending Warriors, and Dunherd Champions. Now, Dunherd Champions are very, very good javelin men, and when they drop their javelins, they bring out a particularly aggressive two-handed mace thing, and they are really quite strong. They can do a lot of damage if they are not dealt with. They have a bonus against cavalry because they're javelin men, as you expect. They've got good stamina, and again, they've got impetuous morale response. But we're also getting into the range now where units have average morale, which is good. Now, their defense is nothing to really scream about, which is how, if I ever fight against Dunland, which I do a lot, I tend to bring these guys down, because their defense is not very good. They're armor 6 and then 4 defense skills. So again, arrows are quite good against them, and just prolonged attacks are good against them. But where they shine is their high missile attack of 9, and the supporting attack, which I believe is effective against armor piercing. I have to double check that. But if it's not, the 6 attack and 4 charge are very, very good. So once they've thrown their javelins, they're very aggressive indeed, and they can certainly help and stay alive for quite some time, as they'll kill the enemy before the enemy can kill them. Although 6 isn't amazing, so they aren't going to do wonders, but compared to the units you've had to play beforehand, these really shine in the early game. Supporting them are the first of the new units. You may recognise these, although they've been edited a little. You may recognise these as the mercenary unit available to train in Dunland and Enedwaith. So the unit you get through the standard Merc menu. But they've been given over to Dunland as a middle tier, sort of to emphasise the heavy armour nature of Dunland. And that shines through in their 12 defence. And again, 6 attack and 4 charge, but they don't have the javelins. As you can see, I've yet to write their description, so stay tuned for that. But their defense is high to keep them alive, and their attack isn't amazing, but they're all about their defense. So they're a very good battle line infantry. They'll hold the line for a long time because they've got a good defense, especially in the early game, and especially against Enedwaith. Bear in mind that Enedwaith's most elite unit has something like 18 or 16 defense. So with only 4 away and coming in before the barracks event, these units are very important to Dunland's campaign. Well, they certainly will be when you all get to play with them anyway, because obviously at the moment they are not yet in the game. You're all looking at version 1 here, not version 0.52. Other than that, their bonuses and things, none of these currently are yet accurate. They will just be copy and pasted clones from somewhere else, so stay tuned for all of that to come. But they will likely keep good stamina, and other than that, I doubt much else about them will change. Right, the next unit is also another new unit, although they just have the old Eisenmach Raiders look. Not Eisenmach Riders, whichever one it is, Raiders. Eisenmach. So the old Eisenmach unit is now just this unit, and it comes in as a middle tier cavalry. Now, of course, Rohan are the cavalry nation really, and Dunland's possibly one of the main reasons why Dunland was so easily evicted from Calanathan when Rohan was given it by Gondor, was that Dunland couldn't match Rohan's cavalry. So we didn't want Dunland to have too much cavalry, but we also wanted them to have something other than just being the heavily armoured version of Ened Wyth, because in my opinion, if you were to look to play Ened Wyth or Dunland, there seemed to be no competition. Ened Wyth were more fun, they had more options, they had a better starting campaign. There was no reason to play as Dunland. So Dunland got some extra cavalry so that they're a bit more cavalry orientated and more heavily armoured units, so you feel a bit stronger even though you're a Wildmen faction. And the mounted warband have been added in for that very need. So high defense and extra cavalry unit just to fill both of those boxes. Again, everything is to be done, so do stay tuned on all of their description and abilities, but the stats will stay the same. So a very high charge, which gives them a nice little edge. Very good defense at this early tier again. Well, very good for Wildmen, I will mention that. Do bear in mind that Gondor's sort of baseline units have around 10-11 defense, so do Dol Amroth, places like that. So 13 isn't amazing in this picture of the world, but in terms of the Wildmen factions and the sort of lower end factions, 13 defense for a unit pre-barracks is very good. Their attack is 6, so not amazing, but with their high charge and good defense, that will at least make them a threat to their enemies. And finally, you get the Beast Slayers. This unit I really like, especially the look of them as well. They can hide anywhere. They have a very dangerous spear when they finish with their arrows. You can see it on their back there. A spear / pike. And the point of these is that the theory behind them, or the description that we gave them, is essentially that they live in the mountains and they do exactly what their name suggests. They slay beasts. And so to account for that, they have a very, very high missile attack for a unit this early on, especially for a unit that isn't a ranger unit. So their missile attack is 5, which is very good indeed. And their defense is very solid as well, with coming in at 9. Their melee is 4, which isn't amazing, and their charge is 3, which also isn't amazing. But do bear in mind that they do have a pike-style unit, a pike-style animation once they are finished with their bows, which gives them a great advantage. Additionally, of course, they can hide anywhere, which is a rare trait in Dunland, or in fact the only unit that can for Dunland, so do keep that in mind. They can place stakes, and to go along with their Beast Slayer theme, the one thing that makes them stand out the most is that they get very good morale. That is one tier away from being the best possible. So that is really, really good. They get the best morale response as well, so they can deal with morale shocks very well. They're just a very good unit all round in the early game. They also get a bonus against cavalry, as you can see there, which gives them another distinct advantage. And as I've already said, they're good archers with an average accuracy and 170 meter range. There's a few other stats about them there. They're also very cheap, so their good stats don't come up. There's no reason to not recruit these. They are good in every aspect that they can be. Right, and then we come to the final tier. So let's move the chieftain's bodyguard over there actually, because they're just your general. Right, the 3 main units you get at this tier are Noble Pikemen, Noble Swordmen, and Dunlending Warband. Although I think the Warband, yes, I am mistaken, the Warband are in this tier. So group those. Yeah, the Warband are here, my apologies everyone. The Dunlending Warband are your middle tier heavy spearmen. So as seen again here, reasonable defense of 13, same as the mounted Warband, hence the name. Although, as Hummingbird, I believe, shares my distaste for Mounted X being a certain name, we'll probably come up with a new name for them. But Dunlending Warband, they get good morale again. Feature mostly of a feature I can't think of the word I want. Prolific amongst Dunland's units. Defense of 13, which is good for spearmen. Attack is only 4, though charge isn't very good, so they're not going to kill many enemies, but they will be able to hold out for a long time, especially with their large shield value. They are quite well protected from arrows. They get an average morale and average morale response, and of course bonus against horses and camels and wargs. Nothing particularly too much to say about the Dunlanding Warband other than they are a solid middle style spear unit. So they won't win any awards, but they also won't come last in any polls of favour in terms of being a favourite unit. That didn't really make sense either. Right, now we come to the elite tier. As I've already said, the 2 noble units forming the bulk of this tier, and then the 2 Eisenmach if you get to within the 8th top ranked factions in the world. So start with the nobles, because you'll get these everywhere and anywhere. The pikemen. These are, apart from the beast slayers, these are your only other pike unit, and these are your only dedicated pike unit. So following from the theme that pike units are rare, but these are your elites. So these are devastatingly strong and rightly feared on the battlefield, with a 17 defense, showing their unique link to Isengard with high armor. Attack is 5, charge is 4, but because they've got the animation of pikes, that is never really a true indication of how strong they'll be, and indeed in this case these are very strong. They can form a spear wall. They're adept at hiding in woods, skilled against mounts as you'd expect. Now, these ones are the first ones that are getting on to be reasonably expensive, still not horrendous. And they've still only got good morale and good morale response, so the Beast Slayers have better morale than the elites. So do bear that in mind. And then there's the other stats there. They're pikemen and they're well armoured. Supporting them are noble swordmen. Again, high defence, a much higher attack this time. Reasonable charge, very similar to the pikemen, in fact it is the same. And similar stats down here as well, good and good. And I believe these may cost exactly the same. Although do bear in mind that in the custom battle the recruitment there is never accurate. But noble swordmen and noble pikemen will form the backbone of your elite units, as both units are very strong and very dependable. The noble swordmen are the basis for the chieftain's bodyguard as well, so we'll just briefly look at those. Those are the noble swordmen stats, 8, 4, 18, and the chieftains are 9, 5, 19. So one better in all regard, but there are less of them of course, so you do have to keep that in mind. There's the stats of those, very good morale, so slightly better morale as well. So the chieftain's bodyguard are essentially one better in all regards than the noble swordmen. They also, as you can see, have axes instead of swords. Which is that reflected? Yes, they are one of your few armor-piercing units. Indeed, I believe that is something that you don't really have. Berserkers are armor-piercing. Dunherd champions, I think, are with their secondary weapon. And your bodyguards are, but other than that, if you can get the Eisenmach Raiders, they're armor-piercing as well. But otherwise, you don't really get armor-piercing units as Dunland. They're rare. But now we can come on to the Eisenmach. These are your 2 units that are available once you get the ranking. And the Eisenmach Axemen are very, very aggressive. A 14 defense, so worse than the nobles, with 8 armor and 6 defense, so susceptible to arrows, but not massively with 8 armor. But their attack is 12, their charge is 7, and they're effective against armor, and they frighten nearby enemy infantry. So they are very, very good shock infantry, if not the best shock infantry. Certainly up there in the rankings when considering best shock infantry in the game. These are very aggressive, very strong. They cost a reasonable amount of money to go on with that. But still, the money, it doesn't really matter because they are totally worth every penny. Their morale is very good. Their morale response is good. They get a bonus against beasts. But even once you've unlocked them through the script, they're still only available in your 3 Heartland regions. So not very widely available even once you get them. But they're supported by Eisenmach Raiders, who have been given the look of the nobles to make them suitably well armoured. And these are elite cavalry of Dunland. 18 total defense, with 10 of that being in armor. So arrows with a 4 shield as well. They're very, very well equipped to keep back arrow fire. Their attack is 8, their charge is 8. They have excellent stamina, and their secondary attack is 10. So they're very, very good. Very, very good at charging the enemy, and then they'll survive for a long time in sustained melee. So they are worth every single gold coin you can throw at them. As they are still not actually that expensive when you can get them. But do bear in mind again that they require your 3 Heartland regions. They require Dunland's homelands, whereas they require... Oh, Dunland's homelands. I must have just read Heartlands in my head. And finally, the Guardians of Dunland. Only available once you unite the clans by taking all of Enedwaith. As you may see, they are the same armour of the Guards of Orthanc, who are also Dunlendings in the Guards of Orthanc. They're not Uruks. And that same armour has been lent to Dunland now that they're a very substantial power. There's a few tweaks, of course. They have Dunlending shields and they have a brown cape, so they're not direct clones. And the shield particularly gives them that standout look. They have a 24 defense, which is incredible, especially for a Wildmen faction and especially for, or just in general really. 24 is very good, but for a Wildmen faction that's incredible. 16 of that is in armor with a 4 shield again, although the shield stack could be due with being a bit larger as they have that massive shield. Means that they're very good against arrows as well, so they'll hold out against arrow fire. Their attack is only 7 because they are spearmen, and their charge is 6, which is actually good for spearmen. But unlike the other units which frighten nearby enemies, these inspire nearby troops, so you always want to get these whenever possible. They have excellent stamina, skilled against mounts, and they can shield wall, forming an impenetrable line. There's their stats down there, very good, with a good morale response, and their armor class obviously being very heavy. Excuse me, sorry. But they do require a unified Enedwaith, geographically not clan name. But they are very, very good. And again, they're expensive, but they're still not breaking the bank like some of the elite elves are. Always worthwhile having them in your army. And there we are. That is Dunland's roster. So let's line everybody up, showing just how many infantry units that Dunland actually have. But then that's not too unbalanced in terms of range and in terms of cavalry. As we've said, we didn't want them to be anywhere near Rohan's cavalry roster, so we wanted to keep them down a bit. Speaking of Rohan, that is who we face here. So we'll charge our cavalry in. And we watch as they ride on and slam into the forces of Rohan, our ancient enemy. The enemy's breaking for us over there. Oh, they've turned straight into some spearmen. Never good, but some damage done at least. Eisenach Raiders doing some good job against the Aered and mounted warband into other Rohirrim cavalry as the Rohan lines meet ours. Show 'em Hillman might. The enemy not deeming to actually attack us, they're just coming in with their javelins. Horse archers. As our beast slayers get arrows off with their large longbows. Oh, they don't really have large longbows actually, do they? They have reasonably standard sized hunting bows. Firing over the line. Oh, they are. Good lord, I was wondering what was happening there. It's like, how are those Rohirrim just running through our line? What on earth is going on? Now, if we pull back, maybe they'll attack us. Maybe. There we are. We've got some attacking.
Our foolish general has thrown his life away, and perhaps our chances of victory with it.
So now we can get in there and have a look at the two forces fighting, and then we will end the video. So some Guardians of Dunland holding off some cavalry. Easy victory there. Very similar looking Rohan and Dunlending units, as Dunland have stolen most of their armour designs from their neighbours and from Isengard. Pikemen showing their advantage with the animation, keeping the enemy at bay. There's Eisenach axemen slaying them with their heavy two-handed axes. Warband in behind. Chieftain's bodyguard fighting back guards of Medusel, the dismounted equivalent of the elite guard of Rohan. There's some Dunlending warriors, Rohan bodyguard, and unfortunately the cavalry have destroyed our militia wing as is to be expected, and almost all of our militia have fallen in battle there. But there we are. That is the Dunland faction, and that concludes our penultimate overview video. Remaining now are only the Vale of Anduin, and I shall hope to do them next week. Although, what is next week? Christmas Eve is next Thursday. So I probably will do that, actually, and then it can upload on Christmas, which is good, because no one in my house will be using the internet on Christmas. So that concludes the Dunland overview. As ever, if you have any questions, qualms, or queries, please feel free to put them into the comments or wherever. There are some questions I hope to answer in the next few Let's Plays, so if you haven't had a question answered and you think it might well be, then do stay tuned for those over the weekend and in the earlier days of next week. Other than that, stay tuned for the continuation of the Let's Plays, as they'll be, as I say, done over the weekend and the start of next week. But for now, and until we speak again, dear friends, Navar Naden Pedimad Melonin, and farewell.